So much for joining us. Our top story tonight, two sisters are headed to prison after pleading guilty today in the killing of a 17-year-old girl at a Columbus park last year.
Markayla Marshall was shot to death at Primus King Park off Staunton Drive last March. Police saying her death coming after a fight between the girls. News 8 9's Maya Graham was in the courtroom. She joins us live now from the Government Center with details. And Amaya, the guilty plea from the sisters coming as testimony was about to begin in their trial, right?
On the evening of March 31, 2022, in Primus King Park on Staunton Drive in Columbus, Georgia, 17-year-old Markayla Marshall was shot and killed in front of her younger sister. Law enforcement responded shortly before 7 p.m. to reports of gunfire and found Marshall suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She later died at Piedmont Columbus Regional Hospital. Two other teens were also wounded in the incident. Soon after, police identified Siona Shakaria Turpin, then 16, as the shooter, and her sister Eureka Denise Turpin, 19, as an accomplice. Both were charged with murder and aggravated assault.
Police tonight issuing a second murder warrant in the death of Markayla Marshall. She was shot in Primus King Park in Columbus on March 31st. Police have issued the warrant for Eureka Turpin. She's charged with 1 count of murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault. Her sister, Siona Turpin, was already arrested and charged in the murder as well.
Initial court proceedings saw claims of self-defense and mutual combat, while prosecutors presented evidence, including social media video and testimony, suggesting the confrontation was planned as a fight and escalated into deadly violence. Over time, both sisters pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and received substantial prison sentences, bringing formal legal closure to the case.
My mother tried to de-escalate the situation. She was like, y'all are family, y'all don't have no business out here fighting. And Marissa Upshaw, she stated, child boo, child boo. Then I noticed, I seen Ivy Bourne walk up to Markayla and she started whispering in her ear. And that's when Markayla came forward with the pepper spray.
Here, we deliver clear, factual, and up-to-date true crime stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay informed on the latest cases and investigations. On the evening of March 31, 2022, several teenagers gathered at Primus King Park after communication exchanges earlier that day indicated a fight had been arranged. The confrontation involved Markayla Marshall and Siona Turpin, with Eureka Turpin present. Video evidence later presented in court showed a physical altercation beginning between Marshall and Siona Turpin. During the confrontation, a firearm was discharged multiple times. Marshall was struck and collapsed at the scene. Emergency responders transported her to Piedmont Columbus Regional Hospital, where she was pronounced deceased. 2 other individuals were treated for non-life-threatening injuries resulting from gunfire. The physical evidence confirmed close-range gunfire. Investigators secured shell casings, reviewed video footage, and collected digital communications to reconstruct the sequence of events. Law enforcement quickly identified Siona Turpin as the individual who discharged the firearm. Witness accounts and video footage supported that conclusion. Eureka Turpin was identified as assisting in arranging and participating in the confrontation. Authorities considered whether the shooting was spontaneous or premeditated. The existence of prior communication arranging the meeting reduced the likelihood of an accidental encounter. Early suspicion focused on whether the firearm had been brought to the park in anticipation of violence. Siona Turpin later turned herself in to authorities. Eureka Turpin was arrested weeks later. Both faced charges including murder and aggravated assault. The motive analysis began with the relationship between the involved parties. Evidence presented during court proceedings indicated an ongoing dispute between Marshall and the Turpin sisters. Social media posts and direct messages reflected hostility, taunting, and threats in the days leading up to the shooting. The communications suggested that the conflict was personal rather than financial or gang-related. Insults and challenges were exchanged publicly online. Witnesses testified that the confrontation at the park had been discussed in advance as a fight. The dynamic was adversarial. There was no evidence of a romantic relationship or financial partnership between the parties. Instead, the dispute appeared rooted in personal animosity, escalating through digital communication. Investigators reviewed whether financial stress or monetary disputes contributed to the motive. Public records and court testimony did not indicate any financial transaction, debt, or property issue linking Marshall and the Turpin sisters. There was no evidence of robbery, insurance claims, or financial gain connected with the shooting. The absence of financial incentive narrowed the motive assessment to interpersonal conflict rather than economic pressure. This eliminated one common motive category and reinforced the interpretation that the shooting stemmed from a personal dispute. Court proceedings examined whether Siona Turpin acted in self-defense or in response to fear. Defense arguments suggested she perceived a threat during the physical fight. Prosecution argued that prior statements weakened the credibility of that claim. Digital communications included language indicating readiness to escalate beyond a fistfight. The prosecution presented statements suggesting bringing a firearm to the confrontation demonstrated anticipation of violence. No formal psychological disorder was publicly cited as a driving factor. The behavioral pattern reflected escalating hostility rather than documented mental illness. The court focused on intent and decision-making at the time of the shooting. Testimony indicated that the park confrontation was not the first dispute between the parties. There had reportedly been earlier encounters and verbal altercations. A previous disagreement had not resulted in violence, but intensified tensions. The rescheduling of a confrontation from another location to Primus King Park demonstrated planning. This detail became significant in evaluating whether the shooting resulted from sudden fear or an anticipated conflict. The prior hostility established a pattern: verbal dispute, public challenge to fight, agreement on location and time, attendance by multiple individuals, physical altercation, introduction of a firearm, fatal gunfire. This pattern demonstrated that the confrontation was not random. The introduction of a firearm into a planned fistfight represented the decisive escalation point. Prosecutors argued that statements made prior to the meeting suggested awareness that lethal force might be used. The defense maintained that the firearm was used only after feeling physically threatened. The turning point in the investigation was the recovery and presentation of social media video and message evidence. Digital communications explicitly referenced fighting and threats. This evidence countered claims that the shooting was purely defensive. A judge denied immunity under self-defense statutes after reviewing video footage and testimony. The court determined that sufficient evidence existed to proceed to trial. The digital record clarified motive interpretation. It indicated intentional participation in a confrontation rather than an unavoidable attack. Siona Turpin surrendered to law enforcement shortly after the shooting. She was charged with murder and aggravated assault. Eureka Turpin was later arrested and charged as an accomplice. Both defendants remained in custody pending legal proceedings. Pre-trial hearings addressed bond, admissibility of evidence, and self-defense claims. Eventually, both entered guilty pleas to voluntary manslaughter and received substantial prison sentences, bringing formal legal closure to the case. While the legal case concluded, certain questions remain. To what extent did peer influence encourage escalation? Would the confrontation have remained non-lethal without a firearm present? Did online communication intensify reputational pressure to proceed with the fight? Could earlier intervention have prevented the encounter? The documented evidence supports a motive rooted in personal hostility and retaliatory escalation rather than financial gain or concealed benefit. The progression from digital dispute to physical violence demonstrates how planned confrontations can evolve into fatal outcomes when lethal force is introduced.